Hi guys. In our second video today, we'll find our excluded values when you have to do factoring in the problem. So in our first video, there was no factoring, and in this video, there will be factoring. Remember, you know that you need to factor if there's adding or subtracting happening in the problem. If you have to do factoring, the first step is still to factor. So anytime you see adding or subtracting, your first instinct needs to be, I have to factor this. If you do have adding and subtracting that does not factor, you still want to throw some parentheses around it so that it's all contained together. Now, after you're done factoring, and before you simplify, we're going to add in an extra step of stating our excluded values. So this is something that goes in the middle of our problems. Factor, then excluded values, and then after you have stated all of your excluded values, then you can simplify and get your final answer. This is the order that we should be doing things in. And I have two examples of factoring problems to show how to do these. Okay, so here is our first example. Now in this problem, I do see subtracting in the numerator and denominator, so I will be doing factoring for both, factoring on top and factoring on the bottom. You are factoring each of them individually, and remember there are three different factorings that we're going to use often: GCF, difference of squares, and Xbox. This one, I will only be using GCF and difference of squares. Since I don't have any trinomials, I will not be doing Xbox. And both my numerator and my denominator have a GCF. In the numerator, my GCF was 4x, and then in the denominator, my GCF was 2. Now, my numerator cannot factor anymore. There is not a square on my x, and so I just can't do anything else. You have to have an exponent on your variable to be able to factor more. But I can factor the denominator some more. So x squared minus 4, that is a difference of squares. It turns into x plus 2 and x minus 2. Notice that the GCFs are still on the outside. This is my fully factored fraction. Once you have your fully factored fraction, then you're going to find your excluded values. Now, your excluded values only come from the denominator, and they only come from anywhere that there's a letter x. So in my denominator, I have a number 2. That does not have a letter x next to it. So this 2 is not going to give me an excluded value. Next, I have a parentheses with an x plus 2, and then I have a parentheses with an x minus 2. Those two parentheses are where I'm going to get my excluded values from. When you have those parentheses, you are going to set them not equal to 0. So remember, excluded values are saying, hey, wait, no, we don't want this to be 0. That would be bad. So we're going to set each individual parentheses not equal to 0. Now, again, we're not using the 2 from the outside because it does not have a letter x, and our excluded values are only with variables. Once you have set each parentheses not equal to 0, then you will solve for x. So on the first one, I would subtract 2 to the other side. And on the second one, I would add 2 to the other side. And so my two excluded values are x cannot equal -2, and x cannot equal +2. If I plugged in a -2 for my x down here, it would turn the whole thing into a 0, and that would be bad. And same thing with +2. All right, once you've stated your excluded values, then you are allowed to simplify. In this problem, I can simplify by canceling out my x minus 2's. And I can simplify outside numbers. So now I can't simplify the 4 with the inside 2, but I can simplify the 4 with the outside 2. So 4 divided by 2 is 2. Same thing here. I can't simplify an outside x with an inside x. So those cannot cancel. So this parentheses with the x plus 2, that has to stay an x plus 2. And since there are no other parentheses with x plus 2, it cannot cancel anymore. And this would be my final answer. Okay, so excluded values and a simplified fraction. Let's try one more just to make sure that we fully understand. So in this problem, again, I have two binomials. So I'll be looking for a GCF and possibly a difference of squares. Since there's no subtracting though, I'm going to go ahead and say there's no difference of squares in this one. So here I have factored out my GCFs, and I don't have any more exponents on my variables, so I feel pretty confident that I'm done with my factoring. Now that I'm done with my factoring, I can find my excluded values. To do that, I'm going to look at my denominator, and anywhere I see a letter X, I'm going to set that part not equal to 0. Now this time I do have an X on the outside with my number 3. So since the 3 has an X attached to it, I am going to set the 3X not equal to 0. And then I'm also going to set my parentheses not equal to 0. Okay, so there were 2 letter X's in my denominator, so I'll get 2 excluded values. For my first one, I'm going to divide both sides by 3, and 0 divided by 3 is just still 0. So for my first excluded value, I'll get X cannot equal 0. For the second one, I'm going to minus the 1 to the other side, and so my 2 excluded values are 0 and -1. Now that I've stated my excluded values, I'm allowed to simplify. Remember, parentheses can only cancel with other parentheses that are 100% the same. And these are. They're both x plus 1s. Now, if you have things not in a parentheses, then you can cancel out the parts to them. So I have an outside x and another outside x. I am allowed to cancel those. And my final answer for this problem is 2/3. This concludes today's videos. On tonight's homework, make sure to do all the parts. So make sure to state your excluded values partway through the problem, and then go ahead and continue with your simplifying. I'll see you later.